Planet Eclipse LV1.6 is not a new paintball gun. It's really just kind of a re-release of something that was released in 2013, the original LV1. But since then, there's been a few versions. There was the LV1.5, the very popular LVR, and now the LV1.6. So in the early 2000s, you know, like 2000 to 2010-ish, somewhere in there, most paintball guns did look like this LV1.6. They had this stacked tube design, you know, really that like two tubes, so you got that top tube and that bottom tube. So there were a lot of things that were similar. Now nearly all paintball guns that are really kind of over $300 are gonna come with that like single tube design, kind of like we're seeing on the Go4 or the CS2 from Planet Eclipse. That's really because most of the high-end guns or those mid-range guns now are all a spool valve design that don't require that two-tube design. They can work on that single tube design like that Go or CS2 do. And then most of those stacked tube guns, those like two-tubed guns, like this LV, used a poppet valve. It's a very simple design. It's been around for a really long time. It's been used on everything from spiders to these high-end guns like the LV1.6. It's popular just because it's so simple and it's very easy to maintain. The main drawback though to the pop valve guns is they're typically a little bit higher pressure. So they work on about 600 PSI, so they're normally a little bit louder and they typically kick a little bit more. That's why a lot of those high-end or the mid-range guns have gone to that spool valve gun that are able to operate typically on about a quarter of the pressure of the pop valve guns, making those spool valve guns just shoot quite a bit better than the pop valve guns. But it's not like you couldn't make or can't make the pop valve guns lower pressure and shoot better. It's just a little bit more complicated, right? You know, kind of think of like, I don't know, we think of cars, right? Like, so there's a lot of V6 engine cars. You know, some of them have 200 horsepower and some of them have 600 horsepower, but they're all V6s, kind of like they're all pop valves. It's just a little bit more expensive and more complicated to get to that lower pressure or higher horsepower. That pop valve name's kind of clever though. So the way that pop valves work is they actually use air to throw forward or move forward a ram or hammer, and then that hammer or ram hits the valve stem on that pop valve and kind of pops the valve open, allowing air out and then firing a paintball. It's super simple, it's a really easy design, but typically it's requiring that higher pressure. But then Planet Eclipse came out with the LV1, which had the new lever valve system that works on a much lower operating pressure than a typical pop valve gun. But that lower pressure just makes the gun shoot much better. I mean, these have very little kick, and that's kind of what's really neat about the LV platform, is it took that pop valve style and then really kind of made it shoot like a high-end spool valve gun, something that we'd really never seen before. One of the most unique things about the LV platform is its low pressure regulator. Having the LPR or the low pressure regulator kind of allows you to tweak and tune the gun's pressures to make it shoot a little bit differently. So that low pressure regulator is only used to control the pressure of the bolt. So it's just used to control the pressure that is used to move the bolt back and forth. The high pressure regulator in the foregrip is actually used to fire the paintball. So adjusting the low pressure regulator, you kind of have to adjust the high pressure regulator, and you can kind of tweak and tune those to kind of make the gun shoot a little bit differently. That's definitely unique though, is most paintball guns are only gonna have a high pressure regulator, so they're not gonna be tunable or adjustable like the LV1.6. So since they kind of stuck with that traditional, you know, two stack tube design, they didn't really change all that much, right? They just kind of added that lever to make the thing lower pressure. So it's still very reliable. So it has that traditional stack tube reliability that we were seeing on all the old Egos or the Intimidators, you know, spiders in the past. I should also say that there's a new solenoid in the 1.6 as well. So the LV1.5s came with, you know, a regular solenoid, but it wasn't serviceable. So you couldn't take the thing apart, you couldn't fix it. When it went bad, you just had to buy a whole new one. And these things are very important. I mean, this is the piece that's actually shuttling and moving around air in that gun really fast. It's allowing us to, you know, get those really high rates of fire. So it's very important. And the new one you can take apart and service and fix yourself. So that's very nice. Some people also say the LVs shoot a little bit different, or that they like have a drop shot or something like that. None of that is true. So the LV1.6 and all the previous LVs, you hold them a little bit different. So I think that hand placement on paintball guns has a lot to do with kind of like how they shoot or how they feel when you shoot them. So on the 1.6, you notice that your hand sits pretty low. So it's not really high, or it's not as in line with the barrel as some other paintball guns are. And I really think that has something to do with it. I think that when the gun's a little bit taller, It's a little bit like higher in your hands, so it maybe optically it looks a little bit different when it shoots. So I think that the LV1.6s or the LV1s do have a little bit of a different shot feeling, but I think that's mainly based on just the way the thing holds in our hands. I have that same kind of problem when I like shoot Luxes, or like, you know, an old Lux, I should say, so like a Lux Ice or something like that. Those guns kick so little, there's so little feedback. Every time I shoot one of those, I like think that, I don't know, the velocity's low or something like that. So I don't necessarily think the LV1 shoots different. I just think it kind of like has a little bit of a unique feel when it does shoot. It's taller, but when I say taller, you know, I mean it's like fractionally taller. So when you're playing with it, it's not noticeable. And I really like the way these feel. So I, for a long time, was using the Geo 3.5. That's my favorite paintball gun ever, I think. And I'm actually a really big fan of the air transfer pipes. So these air transfer tubes, pipe? AT pipe, yeah, the air transfer pipe. The whole reason that's there is so that it can take air from the ASA, from the regulator, into that front regulator. These guns were kind of designed before a lot of hoseless guns were out, and Planet Eclipse have kind of just stuck with this design. I think it's kind of dumb looking, like I don't like the way it looks, but in practicality, I really do like it. When I hold the gun like this, it kind of just gives me more support, a couple more contact points so I can actually grip the gun a little bit better. I find that when I'm like running and shooting, or if I'm like snap shooting really fast, just having that little extra like contact with the gun actually makes it really stable. I, like the AT pipe. It's dumb looking, but it works well. I still think the LVs have the best triggers on any of the Planet Eclipse guns. They just feel really snappy, they're responsive, they're quick, they're super adjustable. I really like them. I'm not a huge fan of this blade trigger. I think personally I like that scythe trigger, that older trigger a little bit more, but that's just kind of a preference thing. And I think overall the triggers on these are just as good as anything you'd ever want. Coming with all the stuff you'd expect from a high-end gun. Comes with a good case, really kind of, I don't know, maybe the cases aren't so great anymore. It's coming with an aluminum case that Planet Eclipse have been using for a very long time. It's gonna definitely keep stuff secure and safe, but these things get damaged and dinged up and they look pretty bad. A lot of manufacturers, like the Shocker Amp, Luxes, all the die guns are coming with better, softer cases that can hold more stuff. So I kind of feel like these aluminum cases that people liked for a long time now are kind of a drawback because some of the manufacturers are definitely shipping better stuff. Has the very good Planet Eclipse feed neck that they've been shipping for a long time on all their paintball guns. And also comes with the very popular Pops on-off ASA. The FL carbon fiber barrels on this thing, which I like. I like these FL barrels. I kind of like the aluminum tip a little bit more, but the FL barrel in general, whether it's the carbon one or the aluminum tipped one, is very, very good. Has a very good LCD screen on the back that you can read in direct bright sunlight. I'm a big fan of using still these LCD screens just because they're a little bit easier to read. There are some guns like the Shocker Amp or the other Shocker guns that do have that nice OLED screen, or the Dye M3 guns have that really nice colored OLED screen, but they're a little bit cluttered and messy, and I just like these simple LCD screens on the back of the Eclipse guns a little bit more. You're getting all the firing modes and settings and timers and adjustments and all the stuff, you're getting on all those other high-end guns too. So that's great. It's coming with really the same electronic features as all the other high-end guns. It has a really good on-off, and the pops on-off has a very good lever feed neck, but there's still some things on here that just make it seem old. Like to replace the battery or remove that 9-volt battery from the grip frame, you have to bust out your Allen wrench and remove these 2 screws from the side of the grip frame. It's not a lot of work, but most of the other guns that are in this price category do have toolless grips now. Removing the trigger frame, you have to remove a front and rear screw, and there are still eye wires and a solenoid wire inside there that you have to remember to detach. So most of the higher end guns now, like the new Lux X or the higher end guns from Eclipse, don't have these wires anymore, and it's just wireless on the inside. You don't really have to worry about pinching wires like you do on the LV1.6. So I think this is just kind of weird, right? It's just old. I said this in the beginning, it's from 2013. That's an 8-year-old paintball gun at this point. It's like, man, Planet Eclipse is releasing like new guns every 2 years, we're seeing Luxes like every 2 years. So buying something new that's that old, it's just weird, right? And at $1,300, even Planet Eclipse have guns that have like more modern features that are cheaper. The Geo 4 just came out right when they released the LV1.6. The LV1.6 is $1,300, the Geo 4 is $1,200. But the Geo4 has like the removable foregrip. It doesn't have that AT pipe. It has like a more adjustable trigger, has better eye covers. You know, it's just a more modern paintball gun. So it's just kind of weird, right? I mean, even Planet Eclipse released a gun that's kind of like competing with it. So I just find it a little bit odd. And you could spend a little bit more money and go to the Luxe, you know, and the Luxe has got all those high-end features just like that, you know, Geo4 does. So it's just odd. Or you can buy a Shocker amp. The amp's even cheaper, and it's gonna come with more of those modern, nicer features. So it's just a little weird. I do think these guns shoot fantastic and are still one of the better paintball guns you can buy, but it's just gonna be missing a lot of those newer modern features you're gonna find on things like that Geo4, the Luxe X, or you know, a CS2 Pro from Planet Eclipse as well. LV 1.6 guys, that's a review. Thanks.